Cash flow. What is it? Why is it important? And how to improve it in your business. That is the topic of conversation today with my guest, Scott Peper. Scott is the co-founder of Mobilization Funding. He works with construction companies extensively, helping them with their cash needs. And we have a tremendous conversation on the importance of cash flow in your business. The good news is you know what to do to run profitable projects if you have the right information. And that's why understanding your cash flow in your company is so critical. So we're going to talk about things like getting your internal team aligned, negotiating terms, getting paid on time, building an emergency fund, building efficiencies into your schedule, tightening overhead. All of these things have an impact on your cash flow, on your profit, on your peace of mind. And so if those things are important to you, you're in the right place today for this Construction Genius episode. Enjoy my conversation with Scott, and please share it with anyone else that you think would benefit from listening. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Scott, welcome to Construction Genius.
How you doing? Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm having you on for a very specific reason, and you can see it in the back there of the video. You have a book called The Big Book of Cash Flow. So we're just going to dive right in here today. What is cash flow?
Well, I focus a lot on construction. So any examples that I speak about, well, I'm going to cater to the construction industry. But cash flow, I think, is so often, and it was intriguing to me because as I got into this business and I started working more and more with construction contractors, I realized that cash flow and profit sometimes are intermingled way more than they ever could be or should be. So cash flow in the most simplistic terms, I like to explain it like this. You have cash needs. We'll call those uses on a weekly basis. You have to spend cash for something, material, labor, your payroll, equipment, whatever it is. And you need to be able to go to this pile of cash, pull some of it off there and use it. And then you also have sources of cash that are coming into your business. And I think oftentimes folks will get confused between your sources of cash being your profit only, your source of cash being the revenue you take in from your customers, and your cash flow or your cash that you make is cash flow is profit. And they're two distinctly different things. And so cash flow is the amount of money you need to spend on a weekly basis, measured against the amount of money you have coming in on a weekly basis. And then you need to look at what sources of cash do you have that can flow into your business that are outside of just your company, for example. We all have heard many, many stories about Tesla, for example. You know, Tesla was unprofitable for however many years, but yet they were cash flow positive. Why is that? Okay, so there's a distinct difference between profit and cash flow. If you're unprofitable, but yet you can cash flow, then obviously profit and cash flow are two different things.
I do want to explore that a little bit more. Please go into a little more detail on the differences between cash flow and profit.
So let's look at it from a construction perspective. So if you're a construction contractor, I like to work in examples and round numbers. Let's just take any trade. You have $1 million contract, you have $800,000 of cost, and you have built in there a 20% profit or $200,000 profit. All right. Profit is the amount of money that you have left over after you have been paid $1 million and you have spent all of your expenses. That is your profit, okay? Hands down. Now, if in the construction world, you could get your contract, you bid your work today, and you could do all the work tomorrow, and you could get paid on the third day, your bid sheet and your profitability, the profit on your bid sheet and the actual profit you earned on day 3 would probably look pretty similar. The problem is it doesn't work that way, as we all know. So profit is really has to be measured over that same period of time and life cycle of each job. In order for you to really determine whether your job was profitable, we all talk about job costing. We could do a whole podcast on job costing and planning. But at the end of the day, if you're measuring all of your jobs and you're measuring what costs and expenses you have against each job, you obviously can can take in the revenue from that customer. It's very easy to measure. You know what you got paid and what you didn't in your pay application schedule. And at the end of the entire experience, you got your last check, even if it's the retainage check or not, you got your last check. You could say, okay, I collected an entire million and I spent X on that job all the way along. That would be your profitability. But what is distinctly different about construction is that you have job costs you actually put onto that job. The easy ones are your suppliers, material, the direct labor that's on there, or your subcontract labor. But in any business, there's overhead. And overhead are fixed costs and expenses that are on that business, regardless of how much work you do, that you can't necessarily layer onto a job. Things like your insurance. And you have to get your true profitability, you have to allocate some type of overhead to that project along the way. That's your profit. But cash flow is, all right, I got that same $1 million job and I have $800,000 of cost. How much of that $800,000 do I need to spend at what period of time on what expenses in relation to when money is coming off the job? Do I need to spend all $800,000 before I even collect a dollar? In that particular example, you need to have an $800,000 pile of cash or source of cash flow from somewhere other than that job in order to be able to execute that $1 million job and ultimately make that $200,000 profit. If you were paid every 7 days on that job instead, then maybe you only need $150,000 of cash flow to execute that job, because you're going to be paid part of that $1 million every single week, and therefore the job cash flows itself much quicker. And so that leads us to the obvious thing is, well, how do I know that? How do I figure that out? And one of the things that we determined is really critical for construction contractors is to create a project cash flow. And it's different than just taking your bid sheet and creating an awesome Gantt chart with your schedule. You really want to layer in how much of that cost you have to spend each week, and then measure that against when you expect and anticipate the pay applications you're invoicing on a monthly basis or weekly or whenever you're paid, or let's just say it's monthly, like a typical commercial construction project, and then layer in that revenue and see where your cash flow gaps are. That's what's critical. And then you can start to determine what your cash flow will be, not your profit.
Excellent. So when you say you should put together a project cash flow picture, are you saying on a per project basis or on a typical project basis? What's your perspective there?
I think it's an absolute must to do it on a per project basis. And I'll tell you, if I didn't believe that in my early parts of my career, I know it to be true today. And the reason that is in our world, we do construction lending for commercial subcontractors. As we were trying to figure out how much money to lend, do we approve a loan for a project? We also wanted to make sure, are we giving the contractor enough money? You know, they might come in only asking for, and we did this a couple of times, it was a big mistake. They might only come in and ask for $200,000 in that same, let's just keep going back to that $1 million job with $800,000 of costs for easy math. They might have came in and asked for $200,000 and we'd say, okay, cool, that works for us, no problem. But you know what? If we gave them that $200,000 when they needed it, but the fact is they actually need $450,000, we're doing them no justice by giving them half of the amount they need. And it's not that they don't know they had to spend it. It's they just didn't know how much they actually needed before they had money coming in. And so we started to build this project cash flow for ourselves as a lender to determine how much someone needs, when do they need it, and then also be able to create this structure to repay it. But what we quickly realized, and this was the best part, Eric, when we gave the construction contractors this cash flow tool in advance, and essentially what we would do is take their bid sheet, layer in when they, how much their payroll is on a weekly basis. What are your terms with your supplier? When do you plan on ordering? Every contractor really has a pretty decent way of bidding. Some have it very intricate and efficient. Others have it in but they all have a good way to know what their costs are, at least a plan what their costs are. And most also have a very good idea of what their work schedule is going to be. They've planned it out. They know it's a 6-week job, 10-week job, 12-week, 2-week, 24 months, whatever it is. But what everyone seems to miss, or not everyone, that's a bad way to say it, but a lot of people miss is the third and most critical part. Over that schedule, how much money do I need to spend off of the expenses that I've budgeted from my bid sheet? That is what really matters. That's the project cash flow. That's what tells you I need $400,000 of this $800,000 of cost, or I only need 200, or I have supplier terms of 45 days, or I need supplier terms of 45 days. And so what happened, Eric, is we would turn this cash flow around. We'd build it. We'd send it back to the client. And almost always it would be they came in asking for more money than they needed. And we'd go back and we'd say, hey, you actually only need $225,000. And by the way, you need 20 grand a week for your payroll. And then you need a tranche of 20,000 per week for payroll. And then you need a tranche at week 4 for $100,000 for the material that you ordered on day 1, but you have 30-day supply terms. And then you need another 50 grand 4 weeks later for your other balance of material. But you start cash flowing there because you're receiving monies in. And they're like, wow, really? Yeah, like, okay, great. Now, the other side of the coin is they come in asking for $200,000. We show them, hey, look, you actually have to invest $450,000 into this project. Here's the problem. You're ordering your material on the first week of the month, which is obvious. You have some material shortages. You need to get ahead of it. But that means you only have 30-day terms. You're going to have to pay that material on week 1 of the next month, but you only invoiced 1 week prior. So you have to float that material bill for 3 or 4 weeks. And they're like, look, that's tough. Okay, what? I mean, 450,000. I'm like, yeah, look, and the project, it doesn't work. It just eats up too much cash that you don't have, or do you want to borrow from us? All right, well, Scott, what can we do? I said, well, look, if you could go to one of your suppliers and get 60-day terms or 45-day terms, or if you're where you really run into it, Mr. Site Contractors, your equipment rental is so expensive here. It's fine if you can pay it when you're paid. You have plenty of margin in the job. But if you have to borrow money to pay for your equipment rental, it totally hoses you. And then, Eric, the best part that worked out from there, so now you have this contractor who has a bid sheet. They know exactly what their schedule is, and now they know what the job looks like from a cash perspective week by week. It's so empowering. They would take that, and this was the part that impressed me the most. They would take that information before the job ever started and fix almost all the problems. They're like, oh, no, Scott, I got it. I'm going to go shop my equipment rental. I was only going to Ring Power because right now Ring's the one that's giving me the best opportunity for that. I'm kind of jammed up with Caterpillar or whatever.
So let me just put a little point here. When we're thinking about cash flow in our business, we're not just thinking about the amount of money that's coming in, but the timing of that money. And it's understanding the timing of the money then leads me to be able to make strategic decisions, whether it's in terms of tapping a line of credit, getting a loan, negotiating terms. If I understand it per project, then I can be much more proactive in the way that I manage my projects and manage my cash around those projects.
And so this particular contract in that case, empowered with the information now, and this was the coolest part, a lot of leaders in businesses, they don't know what to do. The crazy part about the construction contractors that I've seen is they know exactly what to do, what buttons to push, where to go fix the problems. They just didn't know what the problem was beforehand. So now that they had this information beforehand, they're like, no, you know what, Scott? That's $700,000 that I have to spend for equipment. I'm going to go shop it now. Give me a couple days. Okay. So they went to the contractor with this sheet and said, look, I'm about to spend $700,000 on equipment on this project. It's a big line item for me. Do you want me to rent it from you? Do you want me to rent it from you? And they go to their 3 suppliers. Of course, at that point, every salesperson at equipment rental wants a $700,000 order in this example, right? And so they were way better terms to negotiate. Credit was interested in giving them 45-day terms because I told them, look, if you can get this in 45-day terms, you only need a $225,000 loan from us and you can cash flow this whole project, you're good. If you can pay your equipment when you're paid, you're good. So now they take the cash flow, they go to the supplier, they're able to detail that out for them. Now they have 3 suppliers competing. They were able to get another $100,000 taken off their equipment rental. Whereas if they started with the equipment rental and got 45, 60, 75 days out and they're 30 days late now paying, They have no juice. They got no leverage. They can't negotiate, and they're looking like they're the person that's a problem, and they're the terrible contractor. They have no credit, and they're not credit worthy. I'm going to yank your equipment off the site. All that crap doesn't happen when you have good information up front. And like I said, the best part about the construction world is they know what to do.
Okay, so this is really vital here is the connection between the quality of the information that you have and then the leverage that you gain to drive profitability in your business. How much work are we talking here for someone to really get their arms around the cash flow of every single project?
Well, you got to know your numbers. But again, a lot of these folks know it right off their bid sheet. So we've made that very easy, Eric. That cash flow tool I'm talking about, we built it on our website. Anybody can go there and use it. It's 100% free. If you're super savvy in Excel, you can download the Excel file. There's an instructional guide how to fill it out. It costs you nothing. We do get your email, so we can email you that, but we don't market to it. And then what we did learn is a lot of folks aren't Excel savvy, myself included. I'm much more Excel savvy now, but I wasn't always. And instead, we built it on our website where you can also just toggle through and answer questions that are like as if you were just taking them directly off of your bid sheet, and then implement your terms. And then we build the spreadsheet for you automatically and then email you the spreadsheet with the tutorial and the information for your exact job. So it's actually very easy at that point.
Excellent. And we will have a link in the show notes to that if you want to check that out. So make sure that you do. Okay, so let's take a little dive in because you've already been touching on this. As you work with contractors, what is the relationship between the contractors who have their arms around this cash flow issue and the alignment of the internal team? What is that relationship?
That part's critical because I think a lot of companies in the construction world have a struggle between what's going on the project site and the leadership of the site pushing and trying to drive it. Plus they're always balancing their own trades, other trades, and their customer. And then internally, in order for that project manager to manage and execute the work they need to, they have things they need from the office, right? Whether it's they have to buy materials, they need to make sure their labor is happy. So when you have this cash flow up front and you understand exactly what it takes, you can start to align your internal teams, in particular your project management team and your accounting team, to really have a weekly meeting. Say, hey, look, this is where the project's going. We're ahead of schedule. I'm actually going to invoice $100,000 more this month than I anticipated. Or the schedule is running behind. I'm not going to invoice $100,000 more. And they can start to communicate what gets ordered, when it gets ordered, and making those adjustments on a weekly basis in just a quick routine meeting off of a cash flow sheet that everybody understood and bought into in the beginning. They can lean on their accounting team to make those adjustments on a weekly basis and a monthly basis off of what actually gets invoiced, what's actually been spent, and the schedule. That critical communication solves a ton of problems for everybody.
It's interesting because I know like on a project kickoff, people will take a look at the schedule and they'll talk about any of the roadblocks in the schedule. But I would imagine that not necessarily are they talking about the roadblocks in the cash flow around the building of the project. They're not doing that on a disciplined, regular basis. And it sounds like using a tool like yours or having an approach like the one that you're talking about, you're not only bringing the building of the project, but you're bringing the cash flow associated with the project to the table at the very beginning.
That's right. And you can run those scenarios easy too. Hey, what happens if we need to accelerate this schedule? Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to have 4 crews instead of 2 crews. Okay, well, let's double the payroll. What does that mean? How much more do you invoice that month? Okay, well, great. That actually shows you do need more cash, but you're actually you need more cash, but you're cash flow positive 2 weeks sooner because you're able to bill more that first month and the second month than you anticipated. Okay, what happens if there's a bad storm? We're here in Florida. We do loans all over the country, but there's storms and weather issues. What happens if it rains for 2 weeks straight on a site and your sites are shut down? I mean, this just happened in California, right? I mean, it just happened. So not everybody bills. What if the architect screwed up the design and there's a design hold on the whole project, right? And the other side of it too, depending on what trade you're in. I mean, look, if you're pouring concrete and it's just a foundational pad, yeah, you're out on the site. You can manage that. If you're working on let's say you're working on a 4-story building that's structural steel, and there's something wrong with the structural steel, well, you're not going to be on the second floor and the third floor when you thought you were, right? There might be some field engineering. So there's this, all these are normal things that happen in a construction site. It doesn't mean any of it's bad. It doesn't necessarily mean any of it's good, but it also means it might mean for you, oh gosh, I wish I didn't order my material last week if I knew there was going to be a 4-week hold, I would have ordered it later, because you have to pay for that. Those are the kinds of decisions that you can make. I wish I knew that. I would have only put just a couple people on there to move my crew and my labor force to the other side, because I can't afford, I'd rather go get ahead on this other project that I can invoice quicker, because I can't afford to keep the labor on this job, because if I don't invoice enough there, I'm going to get burned, and I'm going to reduce my profitability by 2 percentage points if I keep working on that job until they can get it going. These are the kinds of decisions you're making, like, easy, because it's right in front of you.
I think this is essential as well, because what we're talking about is decisions that perhaps in the moment seem not massively significant, but what they're doing is that they're adding up over time. And so if I have a clear picture of my cash flow, then I can be making those tactical decisions on every project. The points, the percentages add up over time and increase the profitability of the organization.
That's right. And if you're on a job that takes 6 months to do or longer, and you just don't know what the profitability is until you actually finish a job that's 6 months or 12 months, it's really hard to try to forecast the overall profitability of your business and if you're making money or not. And very often I hear construction contractors like, yeah, I'm not going to quite know what I'm making on that job until I get to the end.
Totally, dude.
And that stinks for them. I mean, it's tough. It's hard to do that, because how do you know?
Okay, so then let me ask you this. We've been talking a lot about the spending of money. I think one of the things that I know drives me crazy when I'm talking to my clients is this whole idea of chasing the money. And if you've done the work, you deserve to get paid. Be aggressive in getting paid on time. So how do you work with your clients, advising them to set themselves up for success when it comes to getting paid on time?
Well, the first step is you got to know what you signed up for, right? So like, if you signed up for paid if paid, and then you want to be paid every 2 weeks, I mean, you set yourself up in a bad spot, right? So that's first and foremost, is know what you signed up for.
And you're speaking specifically from a specialty trade perspective there.
Specialty trade perspective. Could be a general contractor too, even, that's self-performing some work.
That's true.
You want to know what you signed up for. And most do. What I mean by that is, even if you know what you signed up for, don't think or assume that, yeah, I signed up for this, but I'll get them to pay me sooner. Like, that's not a good strategy, because if they don't, it's tough. And God forbid, and there's ever any problem, whatever is in writing is what's going to be followed, for sure. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, you want to be why it's so critical to know what your costs and expenses are, is because you want to do the work that you know you can do in a productive, most efficient possible manner, but also profitable, because there's no reason to do work that you're not going to make money on. And so even if you can do the work, and even if it's for this next great customer, but your business just isn't ready for that job or that customer yet, to the point where you have to take the job and be unprofitable, it's not worth putting that risk on your business all the time. Now, I'm not here to tell you not to do a job at a little thinner margin to kind of get in with a certain GC. But what I'm trying to articulate to you, it's not worth it if that thin margin turns unprofitable. And there's a fine line with that. And you want to know where that fine line is and be eyes wide open. The second thing, I think this answers your question maybe a little more directly now. Once you do invoice your customer, first and foremost, invoice them. Like, invoice them accurately for what you did. Know what that schedule of values is. If you signed up for a certain percent complete, in your schedule of values, you really want to do your best job up front to define what is the difference between 20% complete and 22% complete and 25% complete. Make it definitive, less subjective and more objective. For example, I plugged in my computer to the wall. It's either plugged in or it's not. And so as many of those black and white, done or not done things you can do in your schedule of values will be very helpful for you. So you're not on a site doing this field audit, walking it, or more importantly, the bank inspector who doesn't really care, doesn't know what to look at. They don't know the difference between 25 and 20. So you know what they're going to do? They're going to pick 20 because they're trying to be risk, but they know what's plugged in and they know what's not plugged, for example.
Hey, this is Eric. Hope you're enjoying my conversation with Scott. And guess what I've got in my hand? Yes, it's a copy of my book, Construction Genius. Effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. If you're uncomfortable with the sales and marketing aspect of your business, you should check out the chapters on sales and marketing in Construction Genius. They're very, very simple, straightforward, but applicable to your business. And I encourage you to go out to Amazon, spend $20, get yourself a copy. If you're feeling generous, spend more than $20. Get a copy for every single leader in your organization. And then together read the book, discuss the content of the book, apply it in your leadership, and you'll notice a change that will have a tremendous positive impact in your organization. So again, go out to Amazon, buy Construction Genius. You can get it in the paperback. You can get it Audible. You can get it Kindle. You can get it hardback. Whatever you'd like, buy the book, and I know you will enjoy it. Let's get back to the conversation with Scott. What I'm hearing here is, as a contractor, regardless of where I'm sitting in the project, what type of work I do, whether I'm a GC or a specialty contractor, I have to be very aggressive in taking control of what I have control over and not allowing other people to suck that control away because of my lack of discipline.
Dude, totally. And it's not even as much discipline as you're going to get me going on another one of my favorite topics right now, but it's the difference between having an abundance mentality and a scarcity mentality. If you're walking into every meeting like, oh man, I hope they like me and I'm not confident in what work I can do and I just need to impress this GC. And so you give off this impression that you're a little nervous or scared, even though you have the best intentions at heart and you desire to do good and you can, they're reading that you're uncomfortable. And that uncomfortableness is going to make them uncomfortable. So you want to walk in a room, particularly on a construction site with all those trades, regardless of what specialty you're in, GC or not. And you want to be like, listen, I'm the baddest MFer in town at whatever I do. And the reason I'm here is because I perform, my crew performs, we do it safe, we do it effective, we do it right, and we do it perfect, the way we can. Do we make mistakes? Absolutely. When we do, guess what? We own them and we fix them. But to do that and deliver that, this is what I need. And when you have that mentality, someone that's sitting on top of that job that has to manage 20 different trades, or they're worried about making their customer happy, they're going to be like, you know what, man, like that dude, that's the dude I want to work with. He might be like tough to work with, but he wasn't unreasonable, but I don't have to worry about him. Because what everybody cares about on a construction site, most important, is performance. Everybody talks about price, but they care about performance the most.
Yeah, let me go into that abundance mentality versus scarcity mentality. I'd like you to address that framework because I know it's something that some people may be familiar with regards to how I take it, let's say, an abundance mentality and yet manage risk on a project. Because one of the things that I see in construction is that if you're over optimistic, it can come back and bite you. How do you balance that abundance mentality with the management of risk?
Well, it's a great question because abundance and a super positive attitude and seeing the shiny side of everything is not an abundance mentality only on a construction site. Abundance mentality is a positivity. And yes, I can. But it's more of, yes, I can if you do this, or yes, I can if we're in this scenario. Can you get this done in 5 weeks? Absolutely, yes, I can. What I'm going to have to do in order to do that is I'm going to have to double my labor. What I'm going to need from you in order to do that is I'm going to need you to pay me every 7 days, and I'm going to need this, this, and this. Well, I can't do that. Okay, well, then there's no way for me to be able to do that for you then, if not. And so that's an example. What I meant by the other side of the abundance piece is it's being confident in what you know you can do and also be honest about that. If you're used to doing $500,000 jobs and your customer wants you to do a $750,000 job, or maybe $1 million job, can you really do it? Sure, you can. If they want to give you a $2.5 million job and you've never done one of those before, and you're doing a job that's 5 times the size, and because it's literally 5 times the amount of work, not necessarily just an extra couple $1 million of material that you're just selling them material. You actually have to execute on it, right? You got to be honest with yourself. There's going to be a lot you need to walk into that $2.5 million job with probably 30-40% more margin if you're going to do it than you might otherwise on the other. And someone would say to me now, the bigger the job, the smaller the margin. Well, not for you. You haven't done a big job before. So you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be things you don't know. Your risk needs to be, I can go into that job, but I have to manage my risk. I have to have way more profit in there for the things I might screw up or I don't know yet. And that is one of the biggest critical things I see in the construction contracting world is they get very enamored by the price of the top line value of the contract, hammer into it. And they even say, the bigger jobs, you got to do at a thinner margin. When I hear that from someone, it may be true. But then I say to them, how many of these jobs have you done before? Because do you know you can do a job like that at that margin? Because it's different.
I want to circle around this a little bit, and I'd like to make this emphasis because, Scott, when you're speaking like this, it reminds me of the phrase that I emphasize, and that is kings talk to kings. And if you go into a negotiation, if you go into exploring a contract, doing work with someone, regardless of where you sit in the chain of construction, you have to go in with that power that I'm a king and it's a privilege to do business with me. But if you're going to do that, and it's not going to be BS, then number one, you have to have your funnel full of projects that you can build so that you have the power to walk away. And number two, you have to be able to execute. So you've got to be able to develop business and execute that business well in order to have the power to go into those negotiations, like you're saying, Scott, and have the leverage that we began to talk about at the beginning to negotiate the terms that you want and to be able to establish those relationships that are profitable for you.
And don't rush your growth. And look, I say this, it's easy for me to say now. I'm 47 years old. I'm 10 years into this business, and I spent the previous almost 20 years with some overlap in medical device sales. Why I can tell you this is I've made this mistake like 100 times. We tried to grow mobilization funding too fast in the early years, and we ran into all kinds of problems. Not necessarily problems, but we tried to fund too many loans. We tried to fund projects we didn't know enough about. We tried to fund specialties we didn't know enough about. I mean, all the stuff that, quite candidly, is exactly what a construction leader would do in a business, because we're very much in the site. We're alongside our customer. If they win, we win. If they lose, we typically lose. I mean, that's how it goes. So I'm not saying this from like some ivory tower. I'm saying this from pure pain. Like I learned the hard way.
So there's two other things that I want to talk about in terms of cash flow management, and that is building an emergency fund and then tightening overhead. Because again, we're in 2023 when we're recording this. I know we've been trying to talk ourselves into a recession for the last couple of years. It's not quite here yet. It may come soon, but we really haven't had a strong downturn since '08. So what happens is that we're human beings, and so we forget that a decade ago or so, things were really terrible and it was really tough. And so building an emergency fund, how do you counsel construction companies to be disciplined as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, look, I mean, construction is one of the hardest cash flow cycles in industries in the earth. So as much as it takes for every book you read on every other business of build up your retained earnings, create your balance sheet, store your profits, be careful with your CapEx spending. When you do make money, keep it in the business. Don't take those distributions right away. All those things that you hear and read in books, they're all true for construction. But one thing I want to say about construction, to give everybody a little bit of grace, it's even more so important for construction because the cash flow cycle that we live in construction is so vastly different than any other business. It takes longer for you to accumulate profit. You have more risk than average businesses. The numbers are bigger. A mistake can cost you way more than others. So if you try to think about things in 5-year horizon increments, and so if you want to be profitable in 5 years and you want to have something in 5 years, then just think about not taking a nickel for 5 years, even if you can, because if you at least have that mentality, you'll be there probably a little quicker, hopefully, but you may not, but you'll more condition yourself to that. You work because you're working your ass off too. You're working so hard. You're working these long hours. You have all this risk. And how often, Eric, I'm sure you've walked into companies, and we hear this all the time. You know what? When I was a $2 million company, I'm now a $10 million company, and I'm still working for the same paycheck. But it's not because they have this stored profit. It's because we kind of grew too fast, or we did all these mistakes and we built a profit and got wiped out. And so you are working for the same paycheck. So just work for the same paycheck, but do profitable jobs and store your profit. And I promise you, in that 5 or 10 year increment, you might still be working for the same paycheck, but it'll be your choice. And you'll have plenty of cash in your business, and you'll sleep better at night because you'll have retained your profits.
It's interesting. One thing that you've mentioned earlier is this idea of the shiny dollars of the top line project number. I just landed a $1 million or $10 million or $50 million project, right? And oftentimes in construction, ego is attached to that number. And it's understandable, right? It's interesting how contractors need to learn how to shift their ego needs from the top line to the bottom line, and to find that ego satisfaction in the actual execution of the project that leads to that bottom line.
Yeah. Well, I always sum it up like this to folks. While you're focused on the top line, I want to ask you a question. What is it, Scott? If you were to sell the business, would that be something that interests you? Yes. At the end of the year, if you wanted to give Christmas bonuses to everybody and take a huge distribution, would that be something that interests you? Yes. Okay. Well, what if I told you that you'd have more Christmas bonuses, more material things, more money you could take with a $5 million business perfectly executed, or you could have a $20 million business and not have any of those things? Which one would you rather have? And they all say, well, I'd rather have the $5 million business. I say, okay, perfect. Well, then let's build a great $5 million business right now that's profitable, or whatever their case. Maybe it's 20 million instead of 40 million. But you know what? Nail it perfectly with the size that you're at now. Build those systems and processes that showed you and allowed you to nail it. And then you can start to try to scale it by taking on the next bigger job or multiple jobs or whatnot. But if you just fly out and grow top line in this kind of cash flow cycle, even more so than it works for any business, but even especially in construction cash flow cycle, and you don't have the right stuff, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know where you're at any given time, you can get just completely smoked, or you end up working for somebody else, or you work for your lender, or you work for the SBA loan, or you work for this piece of property, and then you have to refinance it 15 times just to get even. Like, it's not any fun. You didn't get into the business to do that.
So let me ask you this then. So let's say I do want to expand the business, and I'm sure you talk to contractors all the time about this, and you painted that picture earlier about do $1 million projects, and now my client's coming to me with a $2 million project, but I've never done the $2 million project before. What advice do you give to contractors in terms of the projects to pick for that top line that are associated with that top line revenue growth, and when there's that gap that they haven't yet bridged?
It's a great question. So I like to look at it like this. The top line is important to look at. Look at it like this. Am I going to have to manage, how many extra crews am I going to have to manage to do that 2 million? So get into a frame of mind of what you actually know that you can do. Oh, managing 2 crews is easy. Okay, well, great. Move from 1 crew to 2 crews then, or move from 2 to 3. Then how much work can you do with 3 crews? Well, yeah, I can do that $2 million job. Can you do any other jobs with it? So start to distill it down into like, what labor can you get? What labor can you manage? That's a great way to go, because without that and without a team, you can't scale.
Can I just make a quick point there? I think this is essential, because you might be looking at a project and think, technically speaking, I understand that project and I know how to build that type of project. It's just bigger than the ones I've done before. But if I miss that labor component that you just brought up, if I don't have access to 2 crews, or if I do need 2 instead of 1, and my second crew is a B crew or a C crew, then that has a tremendous impact on the business, regardless of whether or not I know how to build that project.
Or what if you say, I'm just going to sub-labor that? Okay, great. Well, have you ever gotten subcontract labor before? No, I've done everything with direct crews. Okay, well, how do you know how much the subcontract labor is going to cost?
Really important there. Now, I'd like to go to overhead. What are the sneaky mistakes, those hidden mistakes when it comes to overhead that contractors miss, that when you show them those things, they're like, dude, I've been spending bucks on this for years, and if I just knew that, it would have had a tremendous difference.
All right. So I think majority of folks know the overhead items. Okay. So they know that if they're paying for health insurance, it's an overhead item. They know if they're paying for rent, it's an overhead item. Any debt service you have is an overhead item, including the debt service on the equipment you own. You might be able to layer your equipment into a job and say, oh, that's a job cost. Okay, it is while it's working, but what if it's not, right? When it's not, it's still overhead. So you got to know what some of these costs are and really monitor that. So let's just give everybody the benefit of the doubt and say they know what those costs are. The ones that people miss the most often in terms of overhead that I see is debt service. Like whatever debts you have, are you really managing those properly to know that they're a part of your fixed expense now? You know, I mean, if you get an SBA loan or you have another type of term loan, it becomes a fixed expense. It's hard to layer that into as a job cost. You can put it on your bid sheet, but it's not a true job cost. So you have to account for it. Eric, where I see the problems and the eye-opening moments is you don't know how much of those fixed expenses you have on a monthly basis and how that's going to relate to your revenue. And I'll give you an example. Let's just take the 10 and 10 method. A lot of people say, you know, I got 10% baked in here for overhead and I got 10 for profit. Okay, fine. Well, let's just say you have 10% overhead. And we'll use easy math again. It's a $10 million business and you have $1 million of overhead. That's a 88-ish a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So before you do anything, any given month, the first $88,000 of top line revenue that comes in is going to have to go to spend towards overhead. Okay. So let's take this $2 million job that you're doing, and let's say you bid it at a 17% margin. No problem. So you got $2 million job, 17% margin. You're set up to make $340,000 of profit. Good job. 17%. Perfect. Well, the old retainage comes in. That's 10%. Okay. So 200 grand is coming off that job right out of the gate. You got to assume you're not going to get it till the end and you can't account for it. So now you only have $140,000 of essentially positive cash flow in that job. From the beginning of our interview here, we talked about cash flow. You have no clue when that $140,000 is going to come. It's not like it's a 7-month job and they're just going to send you 20 grand every month. There's no such thing on the schedule of values that says my profit is 20 grand and I'm going to earn it in even increments. It might be in your overhead, it might be in your labor, it might be in contingencies. I mean, we all know where profit's at, right? So here's what happens. If your overhead allocation is 10%, if your overhead is really 10% and you have a 17% margin project and they keep 10% for retainage, you now are only operating with 7% free cash flow, okay? Which means if you layer in the 10% overhead into this job, you actually have zero positive cash flow on this project. And furthermore, in order to even accomplish this job at any point, you have to actually invest 3% into that job just to actually be positive cash flow, not profitable, but you actually have to spend, in this case, 3% of a $2 million job is what? 30 grand, 60 grand, right? You're going to have to spend $60,000 on that job in order to finish it. And by the way, every dollar that comes off of it, you can't use for any overhead expense.
That sounds painful.
So you want to know, it's the life that folks live, but you got to know that. That's what you're doing. And so that's why overhead allocation book is such an important piece to it, because you want to know what your overhead is so that you can properly understand how you're going to account for that and pay for that and budget that and how much work do you actually have to do. See, the beauty of overhead is, and why we call it an overhead allocation is, as you scale and get bigger, your overhead doesn't necessarily have to grow. But what happens early on in your business, you need to have the footprint of your business. So your overhead is going to be a much higher percentage of your business as it's smaller than as you grow it. Because, you might have 10 people that you need. There's 10 functions. But those 10 people at scale might be able to do 3 times the amount of work that you're doing right now. At 3 times the amount of work, they are not 10%. It's only 4%, right? Or 6% maybe, whatever the number might be. And so those are the things that you have to really account for. When I show that to a contractor, you know what? When they have that information up front, they're like, well, I can't do that. I'm not going to spend 60 grand on that. So they might not do the project. Or they might go tell their estimator, hey, look, we need to bid projects that are going to be this, this, and this instead. Or they go negotiate with the things they can do. They pull the levers they can pull with their suppliers, or they pull the levers they can pull with their subcontract labor, or they do get financing on a job. And they say to themselves, okay, you know what? Now I know I can get this financing and where I'm going to get it from.
Obviously, I think we could sit here and talk all day about this stuff, Scott. We're not going to do that because I'm not Joe Rogan. But what we're going to do is what I'd like you to do is just to summarize 2 or 3 immediate action items that a contractor can take to improve his or her cash flow in the next 30 to 90 days.
Okay. First thing is go away for a weekend, sit down by yourself, and really assess what you want, what's important to you, and what's not. And why I say that is because you need to get in the right framework. Are you okay having a $3 million business that's very profitable, that, by the way, might be $1 million worth of residential service work and $2 million worth of commercial work? Is that okay to you if it was profitable? Or do you want to be a $50 million business doing big projects that are no less than $5 million in size? Okay, great. Whatever it is that you want to be, figure that out. And then are you willing to live with whatever those consequences are? And those consequences are the time frame it might take to get to 50 million, the profitability. At the end of a 10-year period, you might be wildly successful with a ton of profit and everything you'd wanted. But did you have to live for 8 years with no money at all? And then you made all of your money the last 2 because you needed to invest back in the business in order to get there. When I say, what do you want to be? That's what you got to figure out first. That's number one. Because once you know that, then and only then can you decide what you're willing to sacrifice, under what conditions you're willing to live for what period of time for you to get there. If you don't do that, you're just going to go out there and fly out the seat of your pants without a plan, and you don't know what you're going to be comfortable living with or not. So that's first. Once you determine that, and if you have a business right now, there's going to be a transition period. But the next thing you need to do is really go sit down and build out what your actual overhead expenses are. Understand exactly what you have to spend on a monthly basis. Do a deep dive into who's important, who's not. When I don't mean people, but I mean maybe what's important or what's not. Who's pulling their weight? What roles do you need? Do you need all your family members in there? If you do, great. But are they all filling a role? And that's any business. Are they playing a role? And I mean, can you have the tough conversation with them? They're there and they're not doing their job. Are you willing to fire them? These are parts of that. Go sit by yourself for a weekend. And then once you do that, you need to get financial expertise in your business. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can hire for it. And it's not just go hire an accountant. It's way different. And when I say financial expertise, I'm not talking about doing your taxes. I'm talking about having real finance knowledge in your business that can look at your business, understand how you get revenue, how you want to recognize your revenue, under what manner you're going to build your structures. Like you might hear the GL codes, right? How are you going to build your general ledger? Which expense items are you going to take and when? What financing options do you have? How are you going to cash flow this business to the plan that you want to execute? And then you can layer over what period of time. And there's some great interim CFOs out there that understand construction. There's some accounting firms out there that can do more than taxes and they can really help you. But at the end of the day, you're going to need a good finance brain to build the structure for you based on where you want to go. And then you can hire that controller or that bookkeeper that can follow the plan that was executed by the right finance mind on a daily, weekly basis, and then be monitored on a monthly basis with your financials from your financial expert. Those are the 2 things I think if you do those right out of the gate, again, you're now empowered and with an understanding of information that will allow you to actually go out and execute to whatever it is that you want to do. You'll know, do I need to bid 25 jobs a month to get the revenue I want at the profitability I want? Or do I actually need to bid 50? What is it?
That's excellent. So be clear on your motivations. Take the time to figure out the nuts and bolts of your business from an overhead perspective, and then get the right expertise in as far as the finances are concerned so that you can get the information that you need on a consistent basis to make good decisions.
It's way too often, Eric. I'm seeing complex businesses, owners, running a very complex business, which any construction business is. These are not simple P&Ls, guys. These are not simple structures. You're running a very complex financial structured business. There's a lot of items. You make money a lot of different ways. you have inventory, you have costs, you have project costs, you have supplier credit. It's a very dynamic construction business is just from a financial expertise perspective. And to run that business without monthly financials is almost suicide. It will absolutely bring you down. So investing in that early is important. And again, it's not doing your taxes. This is real finance. It's your report card. It's the access to information you have. It's so you can be empowered to make these decisions. And I can tell you right now, you'll know what decisions to make because I've met every single contractor from decades of experience to just multiple years. But in their businesses, in their communities, when I give them the information they need just on a project, they know exactly how to fix it. I mean, they know what levers to push. They know how to fix it. It's amazing. And I can tell you that is not the case for a lot of owners in other businesses and other industries. You can give them all the information and they don't know what to do. I have not yet met a construction contractor that doesn't know what to do. Now, everyone struggles with doing it, right? But they know what to do. They know they have to go talk to their GC and get better terms. They know they have to go to their supplier and get better terms. Their willingness to do it or executing it is a different story, but they know what to do. But what I can tell you is I see construction contractors very motivated to do what they need to do when they see the information up front and they know that's the difference between putting money in their pocket, paying their employees, or spending Monday through Thursday chasing money down every week instead of working on top of their business and working on strategy.
That's terrific. Scott, tell us a little bit more about your business, the work that you do, and how people can get in touch with you.
Thanks. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mobilization Funding. We are a finance company that's specific to construction contractors, manufacturers, and fabricators. We started in construction, so we know it really well. But essentially what we are is a source of capital for you to use to execute a project. We've talked all about cash flow today, and everyone listening to this in the construction world knows the struggles. You start a job, you have to pay for things all the way along, starting early, and it takes sometimes 30, 60, even 90 days before you get your first checks off the job. You at least work 30, put an invoice in, and probably work another 30 before you get paid. We're a source of cash to help you bridge the gap in that, getting from the start of the job to the point of the job where it's cash flow positive. And so our loans are short-term in nature because they're always project specific. They allow you to use the dollars up front when you need it. And then as you're paid on the project, we get paid back. We are not a factoring company. We're not trying to offload our credit on your customer. We're basically assessing your ability to perform the work that you've been contracted to do. And if we can help supply the cash that you need, you can execute it more efficiently, put your invoices into your customer. They will pay you because you've executed. And when they pay you, we can then start to reimburse back the expenses that we've helped pay you for and get you to a point of cash flow positive. They can usually do that somewhere between a cost of 1% to 3% of their margin.
Excellent. And how can people get in touch with you, Scott?
So our website, mobilizationfunding.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me at Scott Peper on LinkedIn, Peper. And we have a great YouTube channel as well, which is YouTube. And then you go just type in Mobilization Funding. Our channel will come right up. We have tons of content and great other information on there. A lot of stuff that we've kicked around in some of these topics and many more. So my personal LinkedIn, our YouTube channel, and our website. Those are the best places to find us.
That's beautiful. And of course, you do have the book there, The Big Book of Cash Flow.
Yes. You can get that book on Amazon. They've been carrying it pretty well. You can also get it from our website. There's a link directly to the publisher. If Amazon happens to be out, you can go right to our website. All of the resources and the tools and the cash flow tools I've talked about are on that resource page as well. And you can get a link to purchase the book directly from the publisher. But it's on Amazon. It was this morning too. I didn't even check.
That's beautiful. And I'm just, for everyone, there is a link in the show notes to mobilizationfunding.com/cashflow. And that's where you can download the cash flow calculator that we spoke about earlier. Is that correct, Scott?
That's correct. Yep.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you joining me. Tell me again, you're in Florida there?
I'm in Florida. We're in Tampa, Florida. We work all across the country, have clients everywhere.
Excellent. So in Tampa, Florida, if for some reason I'm ever in Tampa, what's the one restaurant I got to hit in Tampa?
Well, there's a lot of good ones now, man. The most famous that people talk about is probably Burn's Steakhouse, which is a great steakhouse, one of the oldest in the country. They are the largest private wine holder in the world. Amazing wine cellar. You'd be amazed. The wine cellar is a building that's larger than the actual restaurant. Great hotel they own across the street called the Epicurean Hotel. But there's many others too, Italian.
So give me the name of the restaurant again, just so I have that.
Burns Steakhouse, Berns. Yep.
Berns Steakhouse. Okay, we're going to have a link in the show notes to Burns Steakhouse. I know my listening audience is into steak and wine, so if you're ever in Tampa and you need to combine those two, we've got the Burns Steakhouse recommendation. Scott, thank you for your generosity today. Thank you for your insights, and I do wish you all the best.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. God bless.
Hey, this is Eric. Thank you for listening to my discussion with Scott. Check out the show notes for the links to all the resources that we discussed, including Scott's book. And if you like Construction Genius Podcast, please give the show a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. And we're going to catch you on the next episode. Thanks again for listening.